welcome back. Now, the Democratic Alliance has welcomed the South African National Defence Force deployment to the Cape Flats. Western Cape Premier Alan Winde says that murders were down this past weekend. The party is also vocal about the Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane, and it wants Parliament to expedite proceedings to remove her from office following yesterday's damning judgment against her. Now, to give us more insight into the party's view on these stories, I'm joined now from our Sea Point studios in Cape Town by DA National Spokesperson Malatsi. Thanks so much for your time this morning, Mr. Malatsi.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start with developments in the Western Cape. Yesterday, DA leader Mmusi Maimane also on the Cape Flats giving that press briefing. The fact that the army had to be deployed on the Cape Flats, what does that mean? Does it mean that this area is ungovernable?
Look, I think there is a real safety issue in the Cape Flats, and it's been going on for several years. Even the calls for the request to get the army to intervene so that both spheres of government can get a grasp of the situation there have been made previously, because it's been very quite clear that SABC is severely under-resourced to cope with the magnitude of crime levels, particularly associated with gangsterism in the area. And, you know, the fact that the army has now been approved and it's present on the ground, it's a welcome development. It should have been done long time ago, but it is important that their presence on the ground in those communities now are already starting to restore an element of safety.
So, and I was looking at those numbers because I think it said this past weekend the numbers were down. That is the murder rate. I think it was 23 this past weekend, 44 the previous weekend. I think about 55 the weekend before that. And these are quite staggering numbers. But we know that the army cannot stay on the Cape Flats patrolling that area forever. So how does the Western Cape government plan to restore the rule of law to that area? What is the plan?
Look, the plan is for all spheres of government to do their bit. Policing is a national function, and there is severe shortages in terms of personnel, resources, and even budget allocations for policing in the Western Cape in general. So what both the Western Cape provincial government and the city of Cape Town have been doing is to put in measures through increasing the resources and the numbers of policing services, and even specialized teams such as neighborhood safety teams, such as making sure that the special teams that are in there, either be the gang unit from the Metro Police and community watches that are there, have sufficient resources. But ultimately, without consistent and increased policing, it's a difficult challenge, because you need visible policing, and that is why we're already seeing reduced levels of crime with the mere presence of the army, because an element of presence on the ground does a long way to help mitigate the situation, but also to instill the community's confidence that there's an element of safety. So rather than it being a Western Cape provincial government sole responsibility, it's about making sure that all three spheres of government work together and play their role, because safety is one of those functions that requires cooperation around the three spheres of government, with national government playing a major role through the provision and supplying of resources for policing.
But what is your plan beyond the safety issue? Yes, that is pivotal. It's a key issue. But beyond that, what is the plan to deal with the issues on the Cape Flats?
Well, there are several aspects to it. I mean, one is also about increasing improving the living conditions of communities in those areas, because there are social ills that are obviously drivers to crime. Be that as it may, the correlation between that requires that on the one aspect, while the city of Cape Town and the provincial government continues doing what they need to do, which they have been doing, which is increasing investment in social amenities in those communities, improving the basket of access to basic services, but also creating an environment in the Western Cape that will help generate the jobs that the local economy requires, so that people can have lives of dignity, people can have fair access to job opportunities.
So if we speak beyond rhetoric, breaking down what you've just said to me in a manner that the layperson on the Cape Flats watching this program right now, what are you saying to them? How is the Western Cape government going to improve their lives? You talk about access to services. How exactly? What can they look forward to in order to change the psychosocial and the socio-economic trajectory that also bedevils that area?
Sure. I mean, on the social services aspect, both the City of Cape Town and the Western Provincial Government spend a large amount of their budgets towards increasing access for basic services such as water, electricity, and investment in, community amenities such as parks. But linked to that is until such a time that the majority of the population in the areas also have jobs, which what the Western Cape is big on. The Western Cape Premier, in fact, had his State of the Province launched last week with a major focus on how he plans to drive investment in the province to create jobs. That will go a long way towards restoring the dignity of unemployed youth, in particular in the area. On the one aspect of that is that crime is still a factor, even in communities where there are people that have jobs, even where there's provision of basic services. And in those areas, what we need is to have increased policing visibility in those areas, in communities such as Bonchehevel, which currently has 2, for instance, per shift, 2 police officers with 2 vehicles, which is totally inadequate to provide for the safety needs in that area.
So you've deployed the army now to, not you, when I say you, I mean like the government has, but the army has been deployed now, and as you indicated, there does seem to be tangible evidence right now of the positive impact of that. But last week, when we were broadcasting from the District 6 Museum, I'm reminded of a young lady from Bonchehevel there, Irma Titus, and she was talking about some of the daily struggles that she would face and others would face in a place like Bonchehevel. So what are you saying to Irma this morning when you say there will be jobs? Where? When can someone like her access a job? Can we speak in specifics? Because I think, very often government tells us in broad strokes what they're going to do, but the specifics are lost on us, and therefore we cannot follow up on these promises that are made. So where and when are these jobs going to be created?
Well, fair question. I mean, the provision of jobs also looks at the skills of people. So I'll speak to you about the different programs that the Western Cape Provincial Government does. For instance, for young people, there's the Premier's Years program, which is about giving young people opportunities, particularly school leavers, so that they can be in a job environment for up to 2 years, be it in the hospitality industry, be it within the different provincial governments, wherein they can be in a program for 2 years that provides them remuneration, and they can obtain those skills that will then prepare for them to look for better opportunities. I mean, I don't know, for instance, what the skills level of the lady you are referring to is, but the Western Cape is high on making sure that we are driving investment in infrastructure development in the city and across the entire province, so that those investment can create large-scale jobs that can attract people who in many instances don't have high-end skills, because that's where the mass absorption is needed.
So let's go on to the matter of the Public Protector before we run out of time. The DA obviously have asked for the Public Protector to be removed from office, feeling that she's unfit to hold that particular position. And we know that the party wants Parliament to actually expedite that removal process against the Public Protector. But given yesterday's Constitutional Court judgment, where does this leave the Democratic Alliance with regard to other matters pertaining to the Public Protector, like the one relating to the President, where the Democratic Alliance seems to agree with the Public Protector? So just give us your take, your notion on the Public Protector following yesterday's judgment.
Sure. I mean, we've been consistent from the onset regarding the individual of Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane's lack of fitness to hold that role. We were probably the only party that objected to her appointment during the appointing process, because it was clear to us that she didn't execute the necessary fitness that was required. And even our call for Parliament to institute an inquiry into her lack of fitness into that role, it was informed by the several judgments in which she was found to have acted in bad faith, not to have been thorough enough and even honest enough in gathering her evidence, as was indicated by the Concord. But I think it is also quite important to distinguish the individual from the institution of the public protector. The institution of the public protector, regardless of who its head is at a particular time, plays a very important role in our constitutional democracy. So our faith in that institution is unwavering and remains. The fact that we remain steadfast and consistent in our call that the current incumbent isn't fit for the purpose of occupying this office now does not mean in any way that we do not have faith in the institution, because the institution needs to continue doing its work regardless of the number of times that some of its reports are found to not be consistent with the law, as was the case with the ones that we have initiated in calling for the parliamentary inquiry into Advocate Mkhwebane's fitness to hold purpose. This whip will be writing again to the Speaker of Parliament through our Chief Whip, because we had made a request for that committee to be appointed, and it is high time we feel that coming hot after the heels of yesterday's judgment, that the Speaker has to provide direction on the institution of that committee so that it can do its work into determining whether she should be continuing in her role or not.
But you do agree, as the Democratic Alliance, with her report on President Cyril Ramaphosa and the fact that he misled Parliament in responding to a question by DA leader Mmusi Maimane?
Absolutely we do, because even the evidence that we had that led to us raising the question and the president's response was an indication that the president did mislead Parliament. And we are of the view that, the president is entitled, as is his right, to take it on judicial review, and he has indicated that he'll be doing so. And it is possible to agree with several reports where we are satisfied that the letter of the law has been applied properly, and still hold strong views about the fitness of the individual that is Busisiwe Mkhwebane.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for engaging us this morning. And that was Mr. Soli Malatsi, the spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance, speaking to us from Cape Town this morning at 7 o'clock.